Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 102 of my modded Factorio playthrough. So, now the next question is, what happens when tracks cross? It's going to happen when you're going to have either like a T section, where you're going to have, well, for clarification, I'll just make them single tracks, but we're going to have other setups like a T where we have one track coming here and then one track coming here and they have to merge, or an actual straight up intersection where the tracks cross, or maybe it's where they cross but they don't have to merge, or maybe it's where they cross and they do have to be able to merge, and then it becomes an intersection, or I don't know what you'd call that, an interchange maybe. Kind of sounds like the same thing. But so we have options, and it kind of depends on the situation. The problem I've run into is having enough space to place your rail signals. You can, the tracks are very friendly to making a very complicated intersection. You can kind of place them wherever you want to and make it work, but the problem is placing the signals down so they make sense and the trains can use them, because they actually need a physical square to be placed. And since we haven't reviewed train signals, let's get to that, since that's kind of relevant to an intersection. And let's just use a single train here. Put some fuel in it. So basically what rail signals do is they create a block for the train to occupy. So what this light means is it means it's red. It means any train that gets to this light can't pass the light. But if the light is green, it means the areas forward is open and the train can take it. So you see how the lights change. Now, to review, you see how sometimes there's two red lights. And the reason is because this block is taken up by half the train. So it's still occupied. And this block is occupied because it's taken up half the train. So a lot of times you'll have multiple lights. But that's pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy about that. So how does an intersection work? I guess we should do chain signals first too, since we're working on that. A chain signal basically stops a train further away from where the rail signal is. So what a chain signal does is goes down the line and then refers to the first rail signal that it gets to. So this rail signal's green, so they all show green. And you can go forward, and then it goes red because, hey, there's a train in front, you can't go. But you notice how that's still red. That's different. If these were regular lights, they would immediately turn green the time the train is gone, but now they're staying red. What that means is because this section is blocked, a train has to stop at the last chain signal and wait for the section to clear. You see how it's still, I'm gonna need to make some room here. It's still saying you can't go. Oh yeah, we need a second, I was like, oh, okay, let's just move forward, but actually we need another rail signal here. So watch what happens when that turns green again. Boom. They all turn green. So that's kind of what the chain signals are for, is they stop a train before the signal. Now it's possible that the signal, you want to put the signal basically as close to the deciding point on the track that it can be. But it's possible you don't want a train stopping there, so you use chain signals instead. So let's make an example here. Let's see, how about an intersection? Let's just do a basic intersection. Something like that. And let's say there's a deciding point up here. So the train's going up, and there's going to be something that stops it. Although for it to look properly, well, I guess we can place a wagon behind it, make it longer. See how much space this stuff takes almost immediately. But in the simplest sense, all we would need is some rail signals to cross here. Just say, you know, only cross when it's clear, and only cross when it's clear. Now, sometimes you'll get better performance out of your intersection by placing a rail signal after the intersection's over as well as before it. Something like that. And actually, I guess we didn't need to do that because this will show it right here. So you see what happens when it comes in. It's green because this section, this little plus sign here is reserved. So when we come in, it turns red because we've taken it. And now any other train, or this is a one-way truck, so the train would have to come here. It would have to stop until we move forward. But what happens if this train, if we make it longer and make a little more sense, what happens if it gets blocked and it has to stop here? Well, now this rail is blocked. So this train, let's say there is a train, I'll just pick him up. I'm playing with trains. He would have to stop there and wait for this guy to move because he's blocking the intersection. Because he's waiting for something else. So, if instead we put a chain signal right there on the way into the intersection, let's place him right there. See how it's red? It's because this signal is red. But because we have a chain signal, you have to go down the line, and this takes priority. So this is signaling for that light, and it's saying to stop here. When you see, because we have green lights, it means this intersection is still clear. And that's essentially what you would use chain signals for, is to make sure that your intersection stayed clear in the event that trains are waiting for something to happen. If it's a little complicated, one way to think about it is the way into an intersection should always be a chain signal, and the way out of an intersection should be a standard signal. So that's kind of a way of looking at it. And that's going to make a little more sense in a bit when we do our intersection. But that's just kind of the basic thing. On the way into the intersection is a chain, and the way out of the intersection is a standard light. And if you do it that way, it should be fine. Now the problem is if you have this really tightly compacted intersection, it's possible you may not have room for all those lights. And part of getting good throughput with your train setup is just having smart, intelligent rail signals, for sure. So there's different types of intersections we can do, but they get really complicated, especially when you want every train or every direction to go every other direction. So what happens if we had an up and down, and also a side to side, wanting to go through the same intersection? Like, how complicated would that be if we had to design every one of these rails to go to every other rail? You could do it, but I'd like to take a page from our British friends here, and also other parts of the world. America doesn't like roundabouts very much, but other parts of the world, especially like Great Britain, they like their roundabouts, and they're great. They work, at least in Factorio, they work pretty well in my experience. So the smallest roundabout we can do is, it has to be a circle. We have to build that at the very least, so let's just build it like that and get rid of the extra tracks we don't need. So there we go. So if we stick a train in here, let's test it. The train should just drive in circles. Whee! So it works. So an intersection like this will work because it means every train, every direction entering the roundabout can leave the roundabout in any direction they want to, including making a U-turn if necessary. So how to align this up here? Well, if we look at our pattern here, see, this very much appears to be the middle. So we're going to have tracks coming in through here, correct? Let's make sure. I use the pattern again. Yep. And they're going to be leaving the same way. they need to go out this way. Okay, good. And can we line it up the other direction? Yes, we can. So something like this. Make sure it's lined up. Looks like it. And like something like this. There we go. So this is kind of what we're going to have here. We're going to have two directions of traffic going into the roundabout in any direction, and can... Ooh, oh, I almost got killed. I blocked the truck slightly. Two directions of traffic going in the roundabout from any direction and can leave any direction. So now you can also have trains driving on the left side of a double track or the right. So we can go up here and down here, like American style, or we could do like driving on the left, like British, where we go up on the left, down on the right. It doesn't really matter. The only thing it affects is which side of the track you put the rail signals on. And it might matter when you have really complicated setups, but on the most basic sense, it doesn't. So one thing when you're placing signals to make sure you're putting them on the right side of the track is if you're doing the drive on the right, then the signals go on the outside of the tracks, like that. And if you're doing the drive on the left, then the signals go on the inside of the track, like that. So that's something to remember. So let's connect all of our rails to the roundabout. So since the roundabout is one way, and the way it's going depends on what side of the tracks you're going to use. If you're driving on the right here, then you go around the roundabout in a left-handed fashion, or counterclockwise. However, if you're driving on the left, you go through the roundabout in a clockwise fashion, like that. So this track, instead of all this craziness, all it has to do is connect to the roundabout. So you kind of want to be careful here, because you want it to connect properly. So you see, if we do this, it needs that extra space right there. So let's test it just to make sure that it works. So if we get in, we can enter the roundabout. Let's check the other direction. It works. So something like that. So let's get all of the entrances to the roundabout figured out. Okay, that one's lined up good. And when you see it blue, like that, it means you're overlapping an existing rail, so nothing's going to happen. Which is essentially what you want to see if you've done things properly. Okay. And now we need to be able to get out of the roundabout. I'm just going to do it from the exit direction. But like that. Oops. So you see how there's that extra piece of track that you wouldn't think has to be there, but it does. And this is kind of the advantage of using this planner here to build the tracks, is just to make sure every last little piece of rail gets in there. And then there we go. It's not been cleaned up, but let's test it again. You really want to test this stuff before you build a bunch of them, just to make sure it works. So when we enter, we can go around roundabout any direction and then choose to leave, like right here. And when you're driving the train, you just have to push left or right for which direction you want the train to drive. And it gets weird when the train's upside down like this, because you have to reverse the directions. And also, going through the roundabout's a little weird with the train, at least manually, is because you're holding left constantly because you don't want to leave the roundabout. And then when you do, you have to like hit right to leave. But so far so good. But this by itself wouldn't really work all that well without rail signals. So, like we did before, every exit needs to be a standard rail signal. So this is the first spot that we can put an exit signal. So let's put it right there. Make sure we do it properly. It has to be on the outside. There we go. Should be good. And then every entrance needs to be a chain signal. And we can just place these on the other side. Okay, and there's no blinking lights, so let's test it and see how it works. I always want to keep testing it. So if we drop a train in there and put fuel, it's green because nothing's in there. Now notice the moment we're in the intersection, all the chain signals are red. This means that every train that wants to enter this roundabout has to wait until we leave. And then once we leave, they go green, or actually they go blue. What that means, what blue means on a chain signal, I don't know if the rail signals can go blue. They probably can. But what blue means is that some of the directions are clear and some of them are blocked. So it means it's safe to go depending on which way you want to go out. So if the train wanted to path this way, since this is red, it would have to stop here. But let's say the train wanted to go here, since it's green, it could just go that way. Now this works, but a flaw to this is that only one train can use it at a time. But there might be space for multiple trains. For example, what happens if we had a train coming down here and a train going up there, where this train wanted to go straight and this train wanted to go straight? They're never going to occupy the same part of the roundabout. But because this roundabout could only support one train, let's move this guy forward a little bit. It means while this train is going through the intersection, he has to wait, even though there's no train that's ever going to block his path. He just has to sit here. And that's inefficient. This doesn't just apply to roundabouts. This actually applies to a lot of intersections. You want to think logically, should a train be allowed to keep going? And if the answer is yes, you want it to be able to. And since it's red, it means something's not here. Basically, this circle is one track. Actually, it's not just the circle. It's every little nub coming off the circle. But one thing we can do is put a bunch of chain signals in here. Now, the same logic applies. To exit, we need a standard signal. But to get in, or anything else inside, we need a chain. So if we take a chain signal, and looks like we have two spaces here, but let's just put it on the second space. Now, this intersection is basically cut into fourths. If you kind of think about it, this section right here, all of this is one track, and all of this is one track, and that's one track, and that's one track. So now you see it's blue. What this is saying is it's okay to move forward if you don't want to take up this section of track. So in other words, it's okay to go as long as you don't want to do... Well, I guess it would include this one as well. If we move this forward a little bit, it might make a little bit more sense. Yeah, let's put him here. So then let's read the signals. So it's saying it's okay to enter as long as you don't want to go a U-turn. So if we come in, it's fine. It says we can exit that way. It's green. And this one is certain directions are fine. Oops, need to push the left button there. Gotta go back further. Then we go, and we have green. So it's okay to go this way, and it's okay to go this way if we're going a certain direction. And then we get to here. Now the signal is red. It's saying you can't go here because a train's in the way, and you have to go this way. But because it's a chain signal, This train would never do this. It would never stop right here. It would never enter the intersection to begin with. Oh yeah, backing a train through Roundabout is especially complicated. If this train's goal was to do a U-turn, it would stop here. It wouldn't clog this intersection up. It would wait for this train to clear. There's definitely some logic here to not having too many signals. You want to think about, like, how can we do the most with the fewest amount of signals where it's not just a complete mess? And I'm trying to think, do we need to have a signal right here? Well, not really. What would it honestly do? Because this section can only ever be occupied by one train anyway, so there's no point in having this be a signal block. There's no point in this being a block and this being a block when one train can only ever occupy this track right here, because 2 tracks go in, 2 tracks go out, but only one train can ever be here, so there's really no point into putting a rail signal right there. However, there is some logic, if you really wanted to putting a rail signal like immediately right there. It looks kind of dumb, but it does slightly increase the speed of which trains can go through here. Because otherwise, let's say if we had this right here, what it means is, I guess it would make a little more sense if we put it here. What it means is that train would have to go all the way to down here before this signal block would turn green. But it's not that big a deal, because that would only matter if a train was coming up here and wanted to do a U-turn to follow that other train. And doing this actually has a problem, because what that means is if this signal block was blocked and it was red, this train would go here and stop right there because it's not a chain signal. And if we turned it in a chain signal, it defeats the purpose of what we were trying to accomplish. So it's kind of a good example of why you shouldn't go crazy with the signals if you can avoid it. But we have our roundabout right here. Now kind of the idea is just cutting off the extra pieces. And it looks like this signal is attached to this track. So if we got rid of that, it still works. And if you ever see the signals like blinking, it means that you didn't put enough signals in, or the signals are in the wrong spot. So sometimes you get blinking, and since they're all green and nothing's blinking, it's telling me that everything is fine. So, see, it's pretty compact, but one disadvantage to a roundabout is it generally takes up slightly more space than a traditional intersection. But my experience is that it has a really high throughput without having a crazy number of lights. And you have this center section right here with nothing here. So one thing we can place are some power poles. And how did we place them here? Probably should just place it down, but I kind of don't want to. Now, we're going to have to do some modification of the signals to connect this, because you see how these have standard signals, but then those are chain signals. So every time we do an intersection, we'll have to modify it slightly. But I'm just looking to see the positioning of the power pole, and it looks good. So is there an exact center to this thing? Might be. That might be it right there. Looks like it. There we go. So what this power pole will allow is just the power to continue to flow. So whenever we connect a track to it, you see it's kind of hard to see, but the power line will connect. So this will allow power flow to continue. So, and one disadvantage of the roundabouts, kind of already mentioned it, is that driving through them manually is kind of a chore. If you're manually driving the train, you can't just fly through them. To fly through this at full speed, you kind of need the computer to manually or to automatically control it, because you'll never get it. If you're flying at 300 kilometers an hour, you're never going to get through this thing properly by hand. So that is a disadvantage, is they're not as intuitive for a human to drive through them. But the computer is very quick about getting through. So we need a blueprint. And let's just copy it. Looks good. And let's put an R for roundabout. And let's get another blueprint, because this might happen over water. Let's just select everything. And take our blueprint, drop it there. And now it's over water, but it's not going to allow this light to work, so we get rid of that. Everything else is good. And let's say an R again, because we have that steel beam there to show that it's a bridge. Looking good, and we can place those in there. That's all the time we have for today, so I'll see you at the next episode.